You ever notice how rain sometimes behaves like it's following a very specific set of rules that nobody agreed on? Like one part of the city is completely getting destroyed, people are reconsidering their life choices, roads are turning into rivers, and then literally 2 kilometers away, it's just dry, not slightly less rain. Not light drizzle, just completely normal weather like nothing in the atmosphere is currently malfunctioning. And the weirdest part is, this doesn't even feel rare anymore. It feels like rain has learned how to draw invisible borders. Like it looked at geography, ignored it completely, and started using its own map instead. At first, your brain tries to simplify it. You think maybe clouds are just small and local, like each cloud is basically its own little rain container, and sometimes it just empties over one area. That sounds reasonable for about 5 seconds, until you actually look at the sky and realize clouds are huge. Not small neighborhood huge, more like covering multiple cities at once, huge. So logically, rain should also be spread out, but it isn't. So now we have a contradiction. Big cloud, small rain zone, which is basically the weather equivalent of ordering a large pizza and only getting one slice delivered. The first key idea is that clouds are not solid rain machines. They're more like unstable moisture fields. Inside them, water is constantly forming and collapsing, and rain only happens when those tiny droplets finally become heavy enough to fall. But here's the important part. That process is not evenly distributed inside the cloud. So even though a cloud looks like one object from the ground, inside it is actually a messy structure of different zones. Some areas are actively producing rain, some are building up moisture, and some are just floating around doing nothing productive at all, which already explains part of the mystery. Rain is not coming from the whole cloud, only specific regions inside it. But that still doesn't explain why those regions line up so cleanly with the ground below. Now we need to zoom out and introduce something that sounds boring, but is actually the main character here: air movement. Because clouds don't just sit still, they're constantly being pushed, stretched, and reshaped by wind currents at different heights. And these currents are not uniform. Some layers of air move faster, some move slower, some push sideways, some rise, some sink. So what you end up with is not a single cloud dropping rain uniformly, but a constantly shifting structure where certain parts of the cloud are aligned with the right conditions for rain, while other parts are not. And those rain-producing zones move through the sky like conveyor belts. Now here's where it starts to look weird from the ground. If a narrow rain-producing section of a cloud passes over you, you get heavy rain. If it shifts just slightly, you get nothing. Not because the cloud disappeared, but because the specific internal conditions that allow rain are no longer above you. So from your perspective, it looks like rain has edges, when in reality you're just passing through different internal zones of a much larger system. But that's still not the full explanation, because there's another layer making this even more localized. What happens when rain actually starts falling? Once droplets start falling, they don't always survive the trip to the ground. In some areas, the air below is dry enough that falling rain actually evaporates before it reaches the surface. This creates something called virga, which is basically rain that exists in the sky but disappears before it hits you. So 2 places under the same cloud can experience completely different outcomes depending on humidity and temperature conditions below. So now we have 3 stacked systems. 1. Clouds producing rain unevenly inside themselves. 2. Wind shifting those rain zones across different ground areas. 3. Local air conditions deciding whether rain survives the fall or vanishes mid-air. And when you combine all 3, you don't get uniform rainfall. You get patches. Very sharp, very localized patches that feel almost intentional. At this point, it's understandable why it feels like rain is choosing where to fall. Because from the ground, it genuinely behaves like that. One street gets flooded, the next street looks untouched, and both are technically under the same weather system. But there's no decision-making involved, no targeting, no preference. It's just a layered physical system where large atmospheric structures interact with small local conditions, and the overlap between those layers creates very uneven results on the ground. So the next time you see rain falling like it has boundaries, it's not that the weather is being selective. It's just that you're standing inside one very specific slice of a much larger, constantly shifting system that you can't see from below. And from your perspective, that slice feels like the whole story. Until you move 10 steps and realize the system never cared about symmetry in the first place.